To Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, salutations upon our beloved Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Jamaatul Muslimin, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في القرآن الحكيم بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وأصحابه وبارك وسلم. Our beloved Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam as recorded in Sahih Bukhari, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was one day asked, whom is the most honorable of people? فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم الكريم ابن كريم ابن كريم ابن كريم فهو يوسف ابن يعقوب ابن إسحاق ابن Ibrahim. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was asked, who is the most honorable of people? He says, the honorable son of the honorable son of the honorable son of the honorable. It is Yusuf, the son of Yaqub, the son of Ishaq, the son of Ibrahim. Why is he known as the most honorable? Because he is a prophet who is the son of a prophet, who is the son of a prophet, who is the son of a prophet. He was the great-grandchild of Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam. So he was known as the honorable, the most honorable, says Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And that is out of the piety of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Note that one of the significant events, or one of the significant lessons that one can draw from this hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam is the importance of knowing one's lineage. So if we look at Nabi Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam, he is known as Karim ibn Karim ibn Karim ibn Karim, because up till his great-grandfather, Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, was all prophets. So it's good and it's important that we know our lineage. If we think about the lineage of Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, then very few of us actually know the lineage of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. In fact, a few years ago, a test was done at different madaris, different madrasas, with the older children, not the younger ones, the older ones. And it was asked of them, just give the names of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his father and his mother. How many passed that test? Take a guess. How many passed that test? Of the older children, not the younger ones. The older ones, only 20% passed. 20% of our Muslim children who attend madrasa, only 20% only actually knew who the father and the mother of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was. Let alone the lineage of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And very many of us who attend Hajat or Dhikr or whatever, when we recite the riwayat of Barzanji, and everyone, they don't want to recite the second one because it's the longest and it's the most tongue-twisting. But I recall as a young boy, when I started learning the riwayat, I was told by my Ustad, alayhi rahmatullah Ajid Darvish, may Allah grant him high place in Jannah. He told me, mark it farm, memorize it, because it speaks the lineage of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that's why we should remember, as the ulama, they explain that, the ulama of Sirah, that there is blessings in knowing these people, because they were people whom, as the riwayat says, طَهَّرَهُ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى مِنْ سِفَاحِ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ. They were people who were purified from all the vices of the period of Jahiliyyah. They were not people who engaged in shirk, who engaged in fornication. They were not people who engaged in drinking of khamr. They were not people who engaged in any kind of haram. But they were people who were ibadah people, or who were obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we should know where Muhammad is. Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Ibn Abdullah, Ibn Abdul Muttalib, Ibn Hashim, Ibn Abd Manaf. At least up till there, we should know the lineage of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. That's still, what about knowing Ibn Qusay, Ibn Kilab, and so forth and so forth and so forth. Going on to, up till Adnan. So inshallah, it's for us to understand that when speaking about Nabi Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam, that he is known as the honorable because of his lineage, being the great grandson of Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about Nabi Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam in the Quran exclusively, except two other places. However, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about the surah, or rather the story of Nabi Yusuf, exclusive in the story of Yusuf, the surah Yusuf. Surah Yusuf speaks about the story of Nabi Yusuf exclusively. No other prophet story is mentioned there. Only that of Nabi Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam, exclusively. And everything, the chronicles of Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam, is detailed in this surah from the very beginning. And when was the surah revealed? The story of Nabi Yusuf and the surah Yusuf was revealed to our beloved Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam in the year known as the year of sadness, Aam al-Huzn. A year when Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he lost both his beloved uncle, who was like his father, Abu Talib, and his wife, Sayyidatina Khadija al-Kubra, the great Sayyidatina Khadija. He lost them both in 1 year. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam certain gifts from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The first one was the revelation of Surah Yusuf in its entirety. Very many surah, or very many surah, they came down piece by piece. But the story of Nabi Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam, Surah Yusuf, was revealed in its entirety to our beloved Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Some of the Mufassirun, they explain that Surah Yusuf was revealed to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam when the Yahud of Arabia, the Quraysh, they went to the Yahud and they wanted to belie Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and expose him as an impostor. So they went to the Yahud and they said, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is speaking about previous prophets, and he's speaking about this notion of Tawheed and all of these kinds of things. Give us something that we can question him about. And that if he was a true prophet, then he would know this. But if he was a false prophet, then he would obviously not know. So the Yahud said to the Quraysh, ask him about the honorable son of the honorable, son of the honorable, son of the honorable. Who was that? Nabi Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam. But they didn't say to the Quraysh, ask him about Yusuf. They say, ask him about the honorable son of the honorable, son of the honorable, son of the honorable. And only a prophet would know the answer. So what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam not only responded to them that the person that you are talking about is Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent down wahi, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, نحن نقص عليك أحسن القصص بما أوحينا إليك هذا القرآن وإن كنت من قبله لمن الغافلين. Says Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we will narrate unto you the best of stories. نقص عليك أحسن القصص بما أوحينا إليك هذا القرآن, that has been revealed in this Quran. وإن كنت من قبله لمن الغافلين, and before this you are those who were heedless. And now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes into the story of Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam. So not only were the Quraysh caught off guard that now Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam actually knew who Yusuf was, But the Yahud was even more caught off guard because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam narrated to them the entire story of Nabi Yusuf alayhi salatu wassalam. So they were caught off guard. What did they say? Only a prophet would be able to know the story and know who the person was. So when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam narrated to them the entire story of Yusuf alayhi salatu wassalam, by their standards, he has to be a prophet. And still they belied Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us understanding. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that this is the best of stories. نَقُصُّ عَلَيْكَ أَحْسَنَ الْقَصَصِ. The best of stories. Why? Because there are so many lessons in the story. There are lessons for us to understand how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had revealed, number one, this entire surah to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam at a time when he felt that everyone was abandoning him. He felt alone. He felt that he even went to Ta'if, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, where he called people to Ta'if, and he was stoned by the people of Ta'if, chasing him out of Ta'if, and yet Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam still makes dua for them. So he feels like he's sucked down into the earth. What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say about Nabi Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam? What did his brothers do? They threw him fi ghayabatil jub, in a well. And we must also understand, and we'll come to this, the difference between a bi'r, a well that has a wall around it, and a jub, a hole in the ground. So we'll cover that inshaAllah. Where Allah, our beloved Rasulullah felt like this, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent him, لِنُثَبِّتُ بِهِ فُعَادَكَ, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, to strengthen the resolve of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and an extension to all of us. It's really a beautiful story if we were to understand the story of Nabi Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam. Another significant point to note is that the story of Yusuf and the story of his father Ya'qub are intertwined with one another. So we will find Ya'qub alayhi salatu wasalam being mentioned in various other parts of the Quran. But nowhere does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tell us about the story of Yaqub, except in Surah Yusuf. The only other part where we will understand that Nabi Yaqub did something is in Surah Baqarah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَمْ كُنْتُمْ شُهَدَاءَ إِذْ حَضَرَ يَعْقُوبَ الْمَوْتِ إِذْ قَالَ لِبَنِيهِ مَا تَعْبُدُونَ مِنْ بَعْدِي. When Yaqub, he said to his children, he gave a wasiyah, he gave a bequest unto his children, and he said, "Oh my sons, who will you worship after I am gone?" But again, there, as we come to understand, there's some speech about the sons of Yaqub alayhi salatu wasalam. Other than that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about Nabi Yaqub as a central figure in the belief of the Yahud and the Nasara. But it is only in the story in Surah Yusuf that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about the story of Yaqub's life as well as that of Nabi Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam. So we'll be dealing with two prophets at the same time, inshallah. Khair. Our beloved Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam also tells us that Nabi Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam was a very beautiful man. He was a very handsome man. We'll come to understand this, how women were immediately attracted to Nabi Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam. But Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he says, it's recorded by Imam al-Tabari, where Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam says, Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam was given half my beauty. So how beautiful was Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the perfect man. And we are honored to be of the ummah of Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. طيب, inshallah, let us move on with the story of Nabi Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam. قال الله سبحانه وتعالى كذلك نقص عليك من أنباء ما قد سبق وقد آتيناك من لدنك ذكرا من أعرض عنه فإنه يحمل يوم القيامة وزرا خالدين فيها وساء لهم يوم القيامة حملا. Says Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Anbiya, thus we relate to you, O Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the information of what happened ma qad sabaq, before you actually came into this dunya. And Indeed, we have given you وَآتَيْنَاكَ مِن لَدُنَّا ذِكْرًا, and we have given from ourselves, we have given you a reminder, meaning the Quran. Man a'rada anhu, whomsoever turns away from it, يحمل يوم القيامة وزرا, he who does, or rather does not believe in it or act in accordance to the Holy Quran, verily they will bear a heavy burden on the day of Qiyamah, meaning wizra, meaning a loss of sound. They will carry all their sins on their backs on the day of Qiyamah. Khalidina fiha, they will abide in the fire of the Jahannam fiha wasa'a lahum yawm al-qiyamati himla, and an evil indeed will be their load that they will take with them on the day of Qiyamah. For those who had turned away from this reminder, the reminder being the glorious Quran. Glorious Quran telling us here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here, also referring to those who they ask questions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Tell us about this, tell us about that. And this happened throughout the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Where they asked him about Nabi Musa, Nabi Isa, Nabi Ibrahim, and they asked about Sayyidatina Maryam, they asked about Nabi Yusuf, they asked about the moon, they asked about the sun, they asked about all of these kinds of things. And every time Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam gives them the reminder, tells them about what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed, they turn away. They turn away from the reminder of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَقَدْ جَاءَكُمْ يُوسُفُ مِنْ قَبْلُ بِالْبَيِّنَاتِ فَمَا زِلْتُمْ فِي شَكٍّ مِمَّا جَاءَكُمْ بِهِ حَتَّى إِذَا هَلَكَ قُلْتُمْ لَن يَبْعَثَ اللَّهُ مِنْ بَعْدِهِ رُسُولًا كَذَلِكَ يُضِلُّ اللَّهُ مَنْ هُوَ مُسْرِفٌ مُرْتَابٌ. Says Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Yusuf already came unto you earlier with clear proofs, and to all unto the Yahud, and yet you never cease to doubt what has come unto you. When he died, when Nabi Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam, when he passed away, he said, Allah will never send a messenger, or rather the Yahud said about Nabi Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam, after he had passed away, that Allah subhanahu la yab'ath Allahu min ba'dihi rasula, Allah will never send a messenger after him. These are the words of the Yahud. So this is why they try to test Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They thought that Allah will never send the Prophet again. كَذَلِكَ يُضِلُّ اللَّهُ مَنْ هُوَ مُسْرِفٌ مُرْتَابٌ. This is how Allah leaves every transgressor and doubter to go astray in their own dwellings of their own mind. They thought that they're going to catch out Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and yet Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave them the best of stories. طيب. Nabi Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam was a young boy who grew up in the presence of his father Yaqub. Yaqub had 12 sons. 12 sons from 2 wives. From his first wife, he had 10 sons. And from his second wife, some of the ulama, they say that her name was Rahma. Allahu A'lam, if that was her name. Allah knows best. But from his wife, his second wife, he had 2 sons. The eldest of them being Yusuf, and the second one being Binyamin. Right? These were the 2 sons of Nabi Yaqub from his second marriage. His sons from his first marriage were obviously older, and they were known as the Usbah, the greater amount. Right? However, because their father knew that their mother was the second wife and they were younger, also some of the ulama say that the mother of Nabi Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam and Binyamin, their mother passed away whilst they were very young. So even though they were from the second marriage of Yaqub, their mother had passed away. Nabi Yaqub had a lot of mercy upon these 2 young boys. Right? They had lost their mother. So the elder brothers were very jealous of the fact that the father had a very loving relationship with these 2 children, And sometimes, as fathers, we can be very harsh on our sons. Ons wil ons 'n man maak uit ons seun se, right? This is a hard op die kind. You teach a child you teach your son how to change a tire. And now he doesn't know how to do it the first time. And say, and you speak very roughly, right? But with the younger sons of Yaqub alayhi salatu wasalam, the elder sons noticed that he was